She later worked in television production in Edomo, Kenya, before transitioning fully into strategic and national humanitarian communications. She joined Medicines Sans Frontiers in 2013 as Assistant Regional Information Officer, later becoming Communications Manager for MSF Eastern Africa in Uganda, where she led the organization in the 35th anniversary campaign and coordinated digital contact during the regional Ebola outbreak response. To advance MSF's communications across multiple countries, Wairimu was appointed communications advisor for Kenya and Belgium, leading advocacy strategy, digital content and humanitarian crisis communication across 5 countries from 2018 to 2021. Her recognition. Wairimu serves as Kenya's board chair for journalists for human rights and fundraising and communications consultant for the Association of Grassroots Journalists Kenya, advancing press freedom. Higher education. She has a master's degree, a master's of arts in journalism degree from Curating University in Canada, and she also has a bachelor's of arts in community development from Daystar University. Then our guests, Annie Soy. She is an Africa correspondent and deputy Africa editor at BBC. She is a lead presenter, Newsday at BBC World Service. Anne Soy is a lead presenter in Newsday, the world's biggest breakfast program on radio, broadcast live every weekend from 5 to 8 GMT on BBC World Service. Co-presented from London, Nairobi, and Singapore, the 3-hour show reaches more than 500 local radio stations in the US and over 70 across Africa, covering the biggest news and current affairs from around the world. Anne began her career at the Kenya Television Network in 2005, specializing in health reporting. Her coverage on HIV and AIDS earned her 8 awards and a nomination for the UN Person of the Year, Kenya. She joined the BBC in January 2013 as a bilingual reporter shortly after the launch of the Focus on Africa and Dira ya Dunia TV. In 2015, amid the Ebola outbreak in West Africa, she was appointed BBC Africa Health Correspondent. To strengthen African representation across the BBC flagship programs, Anne was appointed Senior Africa Correspondent and Deputy Africa Editor in October 2017. Within an organization of more than 20,000 employees worldwide, Anne has been nominated for several notable British and global awards during her time at the BBC, including the British Journalism Award and Amnesty Awards. Her education, she holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Information Sciences from Moy University and a Master of Public Health and Epidemiology from Moy University. So friends, I would like us to welcome our hosts and our guests with a clap. Can you clap for them? So you are welcome, Wairimu Getao and Anne Soy. Okay. Thank you. Let's clap for her.
Thank you. Could I please get a hand to move this? Thank you. And thank you, Mr. Harrison. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon, everybody. I am very pleased to have you here, and I'm very pleased to see the entire team from Athi River. Karibuni sana. So we'll dive right in. So good afternoon and welcome. Welcome to this live session, live from Daystar University Valley Road Auditorium. As you've heard, I'm Wairimo Gitao, and today we are curating African stories alongside a woman who has spent 2 decades ensuring the continent tells its own stories. So from health reporting, as we've heard from her bio, reporting at Kenya Television Network, KTN, through the Ebola frontlines, conflict-sensitive reporting, including elections, to Deputy Africa Editor and lead presenter of BBC's Newsday, broadcast live from Nairobi to over 500 stations worldwide, Ansoi has mastered the art of reporting, presenting, and producing for global radio audiences. So our dialogue today, telling authentic Africa story on a global stage, is extremely relevant. So Ansoi, karibu sana. Welcome.
Asante.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. I'm delighted to be here this afternoon.
And we'll delve right in. From our audiences, we have students from different classes from the School of Communication, and they're all here to hear from you. So today, Anne, you have reported from conflict zones, you've covered elections, and now co-host one of the BBC's most listened to program, live from Nairobi. At what point, and probably this is a question that has been asked numerous times, at what point did you realize this was not just a job, this was a calling?
Thank you, and thank you for having me here today. I would say it was from the outset when I made the decision to become a journalist, and it wasn't clear-cut. I made my decision at the age of 16 in high school, in Form 4, when confronted with the decision, when you're choosing careers, I finally needed to make a decision because I was one of those students who never really quite knew what they wanted to become, because back then, in the 90s the vast majority of students would say they wanted to either become doctors or pilots. There wasn't much exposure, not as much as you have now. And I couldn't fathom doing those two things. I couldn't imagine being caught with a plane full of people up in the air, suspended, or, conducting surgeries. I couldn't think of that. I had a fear of needles and heights. And at the age of 16, then I had to make my decision. And I prayed about it. I fasted because I realized it was a serious thing. And I was thinking, surely, what will I ever be in this life? And one of those days when I was fasting, I was walking down the stairs at the administration block in high school. And one of my classmates, I remember that moment vividly, called Fanis Ongonga. There are such vivid answers to prayers. She walked up to me and said, Anne, you've been doing so well in poetry and public speaking. I'd been doing that since primary school, going all the way to national levels in the drama festivals. And she said, why don't you become a broadcaster? And it clicked. And I never looked back. So my answer to my career was very clear from God, spoken to through somebody who I don't think remembers this day that she was used in that way. And that's why I consider it a calling. I also consider it a calling because if it wasn't, I would have given up. You've been in the industry, you know how tough it gets. And to just give you a sense of how tough it is, 2 weeks ago I was in Bunia. You know where Bunia is? It's the capital of Ituri province, the epicenter of the current outbreak of Ebola, covering Ebola. And it took us a while to get there because getting the logistics and everything and insurance and, there's a lot that goes on before you deploy. And we were on the ground for 4 days, and we wanted to go to all the 3 hotspots. That's Bunia City. That was not a problem because at least there were UN flights to Bunia from Kinshasa. We also wanted to go to Rwampara, which is the second hotspot, and Mongwalu, which is a very remote gold mining town that doesn't even have paved roads, not a single paved road in that town. And we came back with 3 TV stories, 3 radio stories, 2 online text pieces, more than 1,000 words each. And, we had digital format as well, several of them, in just 4 days. There's one day we went to bed and woke up 2 hours later because apart from even gathering, traveling around, talking to people, interviewing people, filming, I even presented Newsday from there, a 3-hour show. And there's a lot of preparation that goes into that. So it's really full on. And sometimes it's almost like you're just running on adrenaline and then you come back and you're just like completely out because it's not an 8 to 5 job. So if it wasn't a calling, I would have given up long ago.
It is indeed a calling, and having been there, and I think we had this conversation a bit earlier when you came in, kind of looking at then how do you balance it between a profession, between being a wife and a mother as well. How do you, this intersectionality, how it all comes together? And we're happy to hear more about that as we go. So the BBC World Service reaches hundreds of millions of people in London, Lagos, and Lodwar all at once. Africa is often covered by the world, but rarely heard on its own terms. How do you hold all those listeners, speaking of audiences, in your head and fight the editorial pull toward the familiar, and the familiar being conflict, crisis, catastrophe, when the story the international media consistently undervalues or gets wrong is so much wider?
That's a very important question. Yes, it's true we broadcast to hundreds of millions of people. We reach 350 million people every week on the BBC World Service. And we don't broadcast to millions of people. We speak to one person, to one listener. And so when I'm in studio, I'm thinking, what story do I want to tell you? What conversation can we have with you? Because it's that mother who's dropping off her children to school in the morning. She's doing many other things, packing lunch and, calling the children, shouting like all mothers do, including me. And she also is listening to the BBC. She needs to pay, I need to be able to communicate, to have a conversation with her, to draw her in. So it's really about telling stories, and that's the beauty of what we do. We tell stories. It's really as simple as that. One of the interviews I had this morning was one of the rescue teams in Venezuela, a Dutch rescue team, their communications person. And one of the questions I asked was, tell me the one thing that has stayed with you since you went to Venezuela. And he narrated how their teams were, they're searching for survivors. It's 7 days since the double earthquakes, and they're still searching for survivors under the rubble. And he said they heard a woman call out, and then they knew there was a life there, and they started, and it's a very delicate process because you have slabs upon slabs of concrete on these people. So it's a delicate process of, just trying to trace where exactly they are and not injuring them. And they were drilling and trying to get to her, and she kept talking to them until at one point she just let out a huge sigh, and that was the last sound they had from her. And it had been a grueling process trying to get to her, and at that moment they knew they had lost her, and so they had to stop. So it's really about getting stories that connect with people, and we love to hear stories about other people. So it's really as simple as that.
I love how you put it. It's very tough, it's complicated, it's complex, it's difficult, but it's as simple as that in terms of connecting to audiences. And I am sure the audiences here at Daystar University are swelling up with questions of how you survive and how you cope, especially with such traumatic stories. But looking at international coverage of Africa, it has been long defaulted to a single, often colonial lens. One story, one crisis, one Africa. And with Africa with 54 countries, thousands of languages, and vastly different cultures and diversities and identities, as you know, how do you make sure that you report diversity on the continent without flattening it into one-size-fits-all narrative?
Oh, another important question. And yes, we do face that criticism a lot of portraying Africa through one lens. But we try, and I see many of my colleagues try their best to move beyond that. But the reality is, because we're often asked, why is it always about disease, destruction, and death? It's because stories are about us. It's about humanity. And if humanity is at risk, then we care. When there's a war in Sudan and people are dying, that's where the lens will focus on, because it is about human life. It's about survival. When Venezuela faces the strongest earthquake in more than a century, that's where the lens will turn to. There are lots of things that are working elsewhere in the world, even in Venezuela itself, even perhaps to a lesser extent in Sudan, because it's the whole country engulfed in war for years now. So it's inevitable that we will focus on Ebola because everybody is concerned. People want to know, are we at risk? And how are those people who are affected dealing with it? What kind of help do they need? And that's where we come in as journalists to shed a light on that. One, to inform people what's happening. And then two, to educate people as well about the science, about Ebola, and why, when the WHO says that the countries in the region are at a high risk of infection, beyond the region, there's a low risk globally. What do they mean by that? We need to break it down. And we break it down by actually going there, talking to people. I went to the Ebola treatment centers. I spoke to patients. I asked them, how are you doing? But because of the background, my background as a health journalist, and you will remember, and maybe some of those who are older like me will remember Mending the Ribbon. It was a weekly feature on KTN that focused on HIV, but it's not just HIV, because we were coming from a time when it was known as SLIM. It was known as the disease that sends you to your deathbed, and there was a lot of stigma around it. And then we had antiretrovirals coming in the mid-2000s, which completely changed the landscape. And we were trying to deal with that stigma through our reporting, by still reporting on the disease, but also humanizing those affected by it, because they are not the disease. And it was a deliberate attempt to tell stories that were positive about people living with HIV, to educate people about HIV through what is working. So we would look for that person who's living with HIV, has accepted it, dealing with it positively, and is a productive member of the society, and tell their story. How is your day like? And follow them through a typical day in their lives to tell their story. And people realize, actually, there's no difference between them and me. You make that human connection. And that's exactly the way that we are also telling the African story. Because for a long time, from a wide lens, it's easy to say more than 300 people have died from Ebola. It's important to tell that. But go down to their stories, go down to their level, the people who have survived. Tell me your story. Make that connection.
And Anne, I remember this because very, very vividly. A couple of years back, I had the opportunity of working with Anne in the field in Mathare, where we were able to expound more about multi-drug resistant TB. And multi-drug resistant TB became a story by itself because people knew about TB. People knew that tuberculosis has a cure, but then we have this resistant TB that people are not aware of. And we had a story where we went to a woman's house and her son also had multi-drug resistant TB. So it was a double story of debunking this very heavy topic of an issue and a health issue that is not really common to Kenyans, and even for health practitioners who are not very aware of the disease.
Indeed, and through telling the stories of people.
Absolutely.
It's as simple as that.
It's as simple as that. Make that note. And before we go on, and those ones who are watching us online, I'd like to invite you to follow us and our audiences as well on IG, Shine FM 99.9, on TikTok, Shine FM Digital, on X, Shine FM 99.9.9, and on FB, Shine FM Daystar. This is telling authentic African story on a global stage, reporting, presenting, and producing for international radio audiences with our host, Werimo Gitao, and our guest today, Anne Soy. So moving on, Anne, so you've had a very unique and rare opportunity. You have interviewed presidents, warlords, activists, and ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. Which interview taught you the most about listening? I like giving my students exercises on active listening, and I call it a craft and an art. So in this way, and in those seconds before you go live, what do you do to make sure the voice that your audience is here is fully present, not just technically on air?
The first part of your question, how to listen. The best stories come from ordinary people because they have really nothing to prove. They're telling you something about their authentic lives, and those tend to be the most powerful stories. You mentioned the politicians that we speak to. For me, it's usually the most challenging interview, but also a very good opportunity to first listen to the ordinary person and then bring their issues to the leaders, because we have to speak truth to power as well. And so what I find very powerful is getting that quote from the person that you've spoken to in Kibera or wherever, and putting that question to the politician, saying, I met Akelo, and this is what she said to me. What is your message to her? So when you humanize that, it makes a big difference. In terms of preparation, it's very humbling because for global news, you're covering everything. So the one thing that I do, I read a lot, I research a lot. Do you know what I was doing yesterday in the afternoon?
Reading and researching?
No, it was actually different. And I was like, is this really me? I was binge watching The Polygamist. And that's because it had been trending, and I'm like, okay, all right, interesting, right.
I'm actually very curious about it as well. I haven't
And
watched
that's
it.
because the planning producer had set up for me to interview the producers and the author of the book upon which, Su Nyathi, the author of the book that this show is based on. So I was going to interview them, and I said, really, me? And I had to watch The Polygamist because of that, and watch the World Cup. So it's really about everything. And the other very practical thing that I do before presenting for radio, if you meet me in the newsroom, if you don't know how we do it, you might be wondering whether these people are actually fine. Because when I'm going through the scripts, I actually read them aloud.
So you go like, good afternoon and karibu, welcome to this conversation.
And I try to tell you a story. So I always start with, Harrison, let me tell you a story. Today in Venezuela, the interim president, Delcy Rodriguez, because that's how then I make the connection with the listener. So when I'm writing my cues, I'm sounding them out aloud so that it sounds like I'm speaking rather than writing. I write because I need to have all the details and the facts right. But then I write it as I sound it aloud because I need to sound like I'm telling you a story.
The art and the craft of storytelling, and telling it to one person and not to millions. And going a bit deeper, Kenya heads into an election year in 2027, next year. And the media landscape, community radio, mainstream broadcast, digital influencers, looks very different from previous cycles of elections in our country. Drawing on your experience covering Kenyan elections, what is your counsel on holding the line between informing the public and inadvertently or deliberately stoking division and misinformation?
A very important question again. It's really going to the basics of journalism. Remember your journalism 101, the very basic journalism about getting your stories from multiple sources. Verify, especially in this age. Misinformation is not new, by the way, because we like to say in this age of misinformation, it's just that it's amplified more, it travels more because of the medium that has changed. There's social media now, but we always had, those leaflets. We always had propaganda from politicians. So verify. No single sourcing, because that's dangerous. And just make sure that it has gone through all the checks that you have been taught about, and that is how you ensure that the information is authentic. Balance is also very important, especially in politics. And it is so important, even people know to expect balance from us. I remember being in the newsroom during the first referendum in 2005 on the Constitution. And people, even today, during campaigns, actually people have timers. They watch the news with timers. So they said, you gave ODM 3 minutes and 3 seconds, but you gave this other party 2 minutes, and you are biased. So it goes down to that. I remember in 2005, some of the newsroom leaders we had, like Farida Karone, if the story is because there was the campaign for banana and orange was no, banana was yes. If the story for the banana camp is not ready, the orange story will wait. And they will run back to back because people care about that. So it really goes down to, all those tenets of journalism.
And that's a really, really important point there. It goes back to the tenets of journalism. And I think it becomes easier to get caught up in the passion and the politics of reporting on elections. But as you say, the principles of journalism, the tenets of journalism still stand. And if people's story-driven are what drives stories in Kenya and globally, then we focus on those, right? Yeah.
I would just like to add that when it comes to Kenyan politics, I think I feel very disappointed often when I see that a story has just been created around the narrative of politicians. Politician A said this, but politician B said this. That's not journalism. Politician A said this, but then have you verified what they said? Is it accurate? If not, have you challenged them? And you challenge them because you have read and you know the background, and you use that information to say, you're saying this, but last year, this is what you said. Have you now changed your mind? But these are the facts, right? You challenge them with the facts. So it's not really about just broadcasting their narratives. We need to move beyond that.
Absolutely. We need to move beyond the narratives for journalism, essentially. For those ones joining us online or streaming in, we are telling authentic African stories on a global stage, curating it with our host today, Anne Soy. The reporting, the presenting, and producing for international radio audiences. Before we proceed on the navigation of the field, as a woman, as a mother, as a wife, I'd like to send out a big shout out to Newton Ndebu, wherever you are. Mrs. Ndebu says hello. For those ones who do not know, Newton Ndebu was the first Shine FM manager in Athi River back in 2003. So Shine FM people in the house, tupigeni Newton makofi. There you have it, and thank you so much for allowing Mrs. to be here with us this afternoon, learning so much of her life, but also of her career and how she's shaped Africa journalism by telling African stories. So you have navigated a career in an industry that has not always made space for women, particularly African women, in senior on-air roles. Was there a moment you had to choose between being palatable and being powerful? And what did you choose? I like how this mic is going. It's making my voice deeper and softer at the same time. So how did you choose and how did you navigate this?
That's an interesting question. When it comes to journalism, it's never about who we are as individuals. We are only vessels. We are only the messenger. The story is never about us. And thankfully, I've never been in a situation where I'm thinking, I can't do that because I'm a woman. I struggle to think of a situation where I had to make that decision. And it's really about the people whose stories we are telling. And if that is what motivates us, propels us to do what we do, then we'll stop at nothing to tell those stories accurately, authoritatively, and fairly as well, because they deserve fairness. And then we speak truth to power, because often it's about representing those voices that are not represented in public discourse, and then asking the hard questions to those in authority, because they owe them answers. We are only the vessels between these two groups of people. So yes, always go for being powerful, stand your ground as a journalist, stay true to the cause of journalism, which is public interest. That's ultimately why we do what we do. It's about public interest and representing it. And I've been very fortunate, I would say, that I haven't encountered a situation where I was dropped from a story because I'm a woman, or I was asked not to do something because I'm a woman. I have covered war. I put on the flak jacket and helmet. I have covered militant groups, Boko Haram, ISIS, Al-Shabaab. At some point, it was Al-Shabaab calling me. Once I was at an extended family dinner, and I got a call. I stepped out. It was the spokesperson for Al-Shabaab, and he said, "We have killed more than 60 Burundian soldiers in Somalia. I want to send you the pictures. Can you set up a secure link?" So it was never about me being a woman, right? And you know what they stand for, you know what they think about women. But I'm a journalist first and foremost. And that's how I had presented myself. And so it didn't matter. It's never mattered, in my view. I'm a woman, but I will cover Ebola. I'm a woman, but I'll be sent to Sudan. I'm a woman, I'll be sent to Somalia. Once I'd gone to Somalia, and then shortly there was an explosion in town, and we just did what we usually are required to do, planning to cover a hostile environment, and just go and cover it. I've covered clashes. So I've never thought of myself, I always think of myself as being a journalist. It doesn't occur to me that I'm a woman, so maybe I can't do this now.
And that's a really important attitude to carry out as a woman, and especially when in a field as sensitive as journalism. And I'm sure there are questions that are spiraling amongst our audiences today. Those ones online, you're very much invited to share your questions as well online with us. And for those ones who are able to follow on social media, Daystar University channels, on IG, that's Shine FM 99.9, on TikTok, that's Shine FM Digital, on X, that's Shine FM 99.9, and on FB, Shine FM Daystar. So coming to a technological question, I like the way you said misinformation is not new. It's just being amplified because we have social media, we have AI, we have much more internet penetration in the country and globally as well. So as we look at AI, artificial intelligence, it's now writing scripts, generating voices, and editing audio in newsrooms worldwide, in Kenya, even in community media. As someone whose craft is built on human voice and judgment, does that excite you, the use of AI in executing all these tasks? Or does it unsettle you, or even both? And if you could give the Ansoi just the starting out on one piece of advice no journalism school gives an editor or mentor ever gave you on technology and the use of AI, or generally on journalism, what will that be? I think those are two questions packed in one, but over to you, and we can take it the next one from here.
Thank you. Artificial intelligence is unstoppable, just the same way computers were unstoppable. Labor unions went to strike against computers, but today we all use computers. I see it as a tool, and I think conversations are being had, and it's important to hold those conversations about how we can use them ethically and how we can use them to improve efficiency at work. I use artificial intelligence. For example, the interview I did this morning on The Polygamist with 3 people came to just over half an hour. Before artificial intelligence, we would then sit down and listen to the whole of it, trying to select clips. With artificial intelligence, it does the transcription in less than a minute.
And that is one task I never really used to like when I was working as a communications officer and manager, because you have to go to the field and collect all these interviews, bring them back, sit down, listen to all of them, type them out. As you listen, and because you're not a fast listener, you're not a machine, you have to play, stop, rewind, or forward, and transcribe them and type them. Then send them to your boss, then have them back. So I can really relate on this in terms of transcription.
Yeah, so it has completely improved our efficiency in that way. If you're working on a documentary, you have lots of interviews that you have done, hours and hours of content on tape. Now you can transcribe them in minutes, within minutes, and then it's easier to go through the text as you highlight the bits that you want. So it is useful. We just need to continue having these conversations about how can we use artificial intelligence ethically to improve our journalism. When it comes to search, that's another way that artificial intelligence can really help us to really improve, how much, improve the outcomes of, the work that we do. But then when it comes to the more sensitive areas that you mentioned, mimicking voices, those are areas that now we need to have conversations about. Graphics designers have been complaining about the companies that are using increasingly artificial intelligence, even for billboards and graphics, when they went to school to learn that, right? But I'm sure there is a middle ground that can be found, because you can never really lose human touch, I believe. After all, who created artificial intelligence?
The humans themselves. So it's really about having the human in the loop. And there's something you've mentioned there, looking at artificial intelligence, the ethics of artificial intelligence in journalism. And this to add, this conversation has never been so timely, because Daystar University is holding an AI conference in 14 days from now, 13th to the 17th of July. And some of the key topics and issues that will be covered are: how do we use artificial intelligence ethically? And in what fields has AI been used to even save lives and to come up with solutions and improve our workflows too? And there's a question there that kind of, I packed the two together, I jumped them up. So if you could give the Ansoy who started out one piece of advice, no journalism school, editor or mentor ever give you, as we wind up and open the Q&A session, what counsel or advice will that be?
Go for it. Do it. Because you see, you are unique. There's something that God has put in you. Bring it out. Stand out. You don't have to fit in. You don't have to fit in. Stand out, because there's something that is unique in you. Don't be the first person to say no to yourself. If something is something you're passionate about, something that will make a difference, go for it. You don't have to have everything 100%. Just bring out the best in you and keep working on that. I grew up in a village, herding cattle. In high school, I had challenges with school fees, nearly dropped out. In the third term of Form 4, I reported to school and I was sent back the same day. So we had the chapatis I had carried for dinner. The chapatis, I don't know whether maybe you people were carrying what? KFC. We used to cook chapatis and take them to school, and then you eat them one by one over a few days before they go bad. I took them back, and that's what we had for dinner, because I had huge balances. But then, even though I did not have textbooks, I just prayed about it, read, and just before the exam, I went back, looked for the principal myself. I was only 16, and asked for a chance to sit the exam. Whilst I was reading at home, one neighbor came and suggested that maybe I should just give up on high school education and I could become a tailor. She knew that my mother had a sewing machine. It's like, you can be repairing clothes at the local center. I said, well, I don't want to let the school down, because if I don't sit this exam, the mean score will go down. And by God's grace, I went back to school. Thankfully, the principal was kind enough, allowed me to sit the exam. And I was the second best student at the school. It was a national school. And don't underestimate faith. So don't ever allow anyone to reduce you, to tell you that you cannot achieve what you have set out to achieve. No matter what obstacles stand in the way, have faith and go for it. Bring out the best in you.
Have faith, go for it, and bring out the best in you. And as we wind up, Safari Podcast, this is a podcast I host monthly, and on the belief that African stories told by African voices can move the world. In one sentence or two, what is the African story you most want the world to hear right now?
That Africa is not one story.
That's a good one, eh? That's a really good one. Africa is not a one story. Would you like to expound a bit on that?
It's a very diverse continent. It has the good, a lot of good. It does have the bad, but who doesn't? We just need to keep telling these stories, the stories of people, the stories of what makes the continent tick, the stories of what is working on the continent, as well as what is not working, and put that to the leadership. So we just should never stop. Let's keep doing what we do. It's not easy. I can tell you, having covered Africa, it's not easy. But we can make a difference. We need to keep telling these stories.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you so much, Anne. And on that note, I'd like to open the floor. Anne has given us her story, and I believe now it's your turn, Daystar University, to raise your hand, ask boldly. This is your moment to learn directly from her. So I will ask my class representatives, Joy, Owen, and Newton, to please pass the mic. If you have any question, comment, feedback, just raise your hand as we go around with the questions. Do we have an additional mic, or should we use this one?
Okay, allow me to start. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sheila. I am a PR student at Daystar, and also a radio presenter at Shine FM. So the question I have is, your content today has resonated because as we keep learning on how to become better journalists, the main communication is let us be the ones to tell our stories. So given the experience you've had, given the stories you've told, what is it that we need to do, or what is it that we need to learn to be able to tell the positive stories about our places? Because you will find the stories that will resonate in the West of what they know about Africa or African countries or the African people will be on the negative side. It will be famine happened, drought happened, war happened. So what is it that we need to do, or what is it we need to tweak? What do we need to learn better to be able to tell stories that are positive about us? Because there is a lot of good that is happening within our own spaces. What do we need to learn to be able to tell those stories, and for those stories to get the reach that our everyday stories get? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sheila, for that very important question. Shall we take one more? One more. I see a hand there.
Okay.
There are two hands. We can take two more. Let's just do one more. Let's start with you, yes? Yes. And then we'll do two more.
Okay. My name is Papecha Kaliche. I'm pursuing public relations. My question is, you've talked about having faith in what you believe in, and also passion. But considering the society today, journalism is kinda despised a lot. And this is from, I have a younger sister who wants to pursue journalism, but the parents are kinda against it. She's so passionate about She's so passionate about it, she wants to pursue it, but they're like, that is not a good career for you. She's trying to push it, but it's not going the way according to the way she wants. So what can you say about that? Thank you.
Thank you very much. If you pick up the mic, please say your name. So I heard Sheila, thank you. And you are? Perpetua. Perpetua, thank you very much. We'll let Ansoy take those two questions, and then we'll pass the mic next there. So, yes, we'll go there. So, Ansoy, over to you.
Thank you for your brilliant questions. Sheila, what we need to learn to tell positive stories about famine and war, you can't entirely tell them in a positive light. It's really about framing. And here's the difference. It's one thing to tell stories about people dying, and it's factual, right? You can talk about people who are dying. But in that community, you won't lack one or two people who are trying to do something about it. So you can still tell that story about famine and the strife and how families are going without food through the person who's trying to do, in their own small way, something about it. I'll give you an example. Since the war in Sudan broke out, one of the stories that we have told consistently, especially on the program that I work in, is the story of the community kitchens. These are, as the name suggests, kitchens created by members of the community, communal kitchens. So they look for food, they look for donations, and they cook a lot of food, and then people go and get hot meals from them. It's run by the members of that community. And they're able to fundraise because they have come together. So you can tell the story of how difficult life has become through that, right? Because it's not often that you will go to a communal kitchen in your village to get food. But the fact that people are lining up to get food from there tells you the story about the impact of this war. But at the same time, I'm not suggesting that you sweep under the carpet things that are not working. The rapes, for example, that are happening. One of the most difficult stories I've had to cover on Sudan is the rape that has been happening on a very large scale, where militants go and take over homes and rape different generations of women, from the grandmothers, the mothers, and their children, while they force the men of the family to watch at gunpoint. You can't sweep that story under the carpet. You have to tell that story. But it's really about getting the other stories as well, because it's not... There are many people trying to make a difference in that community. So it's really balancing that narrative. The other example I'll give you is the language that we use to tell a lot of the stories we tell. So I'm sure that you perhaps have come across training on how to tell stories about people living with disabilities, not disabled people. That's about framing, right? Stories about people living with HIV. Before then, we used to say AIDS victims or AIDS sufferers. So we got rid of the word sufferer because, you still mean the same thing, but it just leaves a different perception. Because there are people who are active, who are productive, who are living positively with HIV. It's a small part of their life. Many of them are on medication. And whilst it's the reality of their lives, they're living their lives productively. They are CEOs. They are, taking care of their families. They are not AIDS sufferers. They're people living with HIV. So it's really also about the framing. Some of the things that I have done in a multicultural context, we work in diverse newsrooms. And so we'll go to a village, and for radio, when you get to the village, you stand and just listen. Are there birds chirping? Is there a river down the valley? And just record that sound. And then you start to describe what you can see. You describe the homes. I can see about a dozen homes just down the valley. And at one point, one of the producers I was working with, they said, no, those are shacks. And I said, no, people live there. They're not shacks. Those are their homes. You see the difference that it makes. You can say, I can see a dozen shacks, and it just leaves a completely different perspective. But you can say, I can see a dozen homes made of corrugated iron sheets, or, made of mud walls and grass thatches. They're not shacks, they're people's homes. That's what I mean by, telling these stories, humanizing those stories, and telling those stories with dignity, giving those people that you're telling the stories about the dignity that they deserve.
Thank
Perpetua.
you for Perpetua, and then we pass the mic there. We'll come here, go back there, and then take the last round in front here. So Perpetua.
Perpetua, thank you for your question. And I know it's the reality of many homes and many conversations now, and especially when every day you're hearing Vice News has been shut down, you're hearing the Washington Post was gutted, more than hundreds of journalists were let go of. Some of them in the war zone, they just received an email to tell them that their jobs have been closed. And it's been a very challenging 5, maybe nearly 10 years in the media. And, every parent would be concerned about that. Many of us also in the industry are concerned about that. But that's the reality that we're living with nowadays. When you look at data from Reuters Foundation, for example, and many other organizations that have, done the tracking, your generation, the majority of you get their news from social media. Can I see by show of hand? Social media first, or TV? TV? Radio? Newspapers? Nobody. Mwalimu is here. So that's the reality of where we are. And we are having these conversations about how do we survive when technology is changing? And it's a conversation that is ongoing. I don't have like a yes or no answer for you, but it's an ongoing conversation. But journalism is not despised. People still look for authentic news from news media that they trust. When you look at the trust levels, they still go back to the traditional media they trust to get that news, even though some of it now is coming on social media. So the platforms are changing, but the trust is not.
And absolutely, and more so for community media as well, as we look up to the BC in terms of credibility, in terms of content, in terms of accuracy. People are asking themselves, then how do I consume media from that radio station that is in my community? And a good example is what Association of Grassroots Journalists Kenya is doing with over 800 community journalists to ensure that community journalists are being trained so that when you go back home, you can be part of that community journalist, or even you can start your own podcast. So we'll take those who are passing on the mic. As we come to an end of the session, we will have a time with Anne with us. So we will wrap up and we will move outside at the garden or at the stairs to just interact and to share more. So if we could pass the mic there, because there's an entire team with us this afternoon from Athi River who would be going back to Athi River as well. So I would like very much to respect that. And there's another team that is using this room immediately afterwards. So your questions, your name and the question as we go on. Thank you.
Okay, hi. My name is Sandra. In my 4th year doing electronic media. My question is for the journalists who work for the West, for those Western media platforms, be it CNN, be it Al Jazeera, be it even BBC. Yes, even BBC. Do you feel like they are not truly telling African stories authentically as it is because they work for these Western media places where maybe we say the issue that's happening in the Congo, there's not a lot of coverage because the US also benefits from the Congo. So you can't go and say this and this and they are your boss. So, if you say this, you might be taken out, or you'll be fired, not taken out, you'll be fired. So, so do you feel like there's that factor in, like, for those journalists who have gotten that opportunity to work abroad, and what can you say about that? Like, what can you say as an upcoming maybe journalist like myself who would want to work for an international media organization? What should one do about that? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Andrea, for that question. Yes, you. Name and question.
Okay, hi. My name is Michelle Kanyeki. I am a 3rd-year student from Daystar University studying electronic media. And my question is to add on to Perpetra's, actually, regarding, you said Somali, Sri Congo, you said something about Ebola.
Ebola, man, fear.
Bombs, all these things. Like, that was very interesting. But I want to talk about journalism and security. We see a lot of suppression, actually. Talk about Tanzania, Uganda, Kenyan. Like, people don't want the media to talk. Our voices are being suppressed. So how do we keep telling these stories if the big guys at the top don't want us to tell them anymore? That's my question.
That is a very important question. Let's take one more. And then Answer is going to take those 3. And then we'll do a final round. Then you'll forgive me, as we wrap up, we'll go and have a much more deeper discussion with Anne after this session. Go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Leila Sombwana, and my question to Ms. Anne is, do I have to follow a process? For example, do I have to work for Citizen or rather KTN for me to join BBC? Or just, for example, if I decide I just want to do an attachment at BBC, can I get an opportunity to work there? That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anne, if you could take those 3, and then we'll do a final round of 3 more.
Thank you very much for the brilliant questions. Let me start with the last one about internships. At the moment, we do not have opportunities for internships. However, we've had programs. For example, there's a program that targets aspiring journalists who are living with disabilities. And so we had 3 last year. I worked with them during the training. One of them has hearing disabilities, and so we had a translator, sign language translator, while I was doing the training. And so the others were physical disabilities. So we have different programs. That's a global program. It happens here. It happens in the UK as well. But at the moment, we do not have, the regular cycle of internships or attachments, which the kind that MCK, for example, runs. But that would be the best, actually, organization to help connect you to media houses.
Yeah, The Media Council of Kenya.
The Media Council of Kenya. Regarding security and how to tell stories under repression, that's a very important question, especially at a time when hundreds of journalists have been killed in recent years just because of their journalism or in the line of duty, telling stories. And it's a serious thing, and we have different initiatives all around the world that deals with the security of journalists. The International International Press Association, which I was a board member of, well, still am, we have a program for journalists in exile, and we have supported dozens of journalists from Sudan, from the Democratic Republic of Congo, and other neighboring countries that have been facing repression and have had to evacuate with their families. And so there are initiatives, the Committee to Protect Journalists as well, that works with journalists to make sure that, under repression, they are protected and they continue to tell those stories. And they are remarkable stories of courage, of people working under very difficult circumstances in many different contexts. It can be political, it can be security, but people still continue to tell those stories. There are places that we are not allowed to go to. They use visas and things like those to make sure we don't go. But information flows, right? And we're still able to get that information and tell those stories. So that's really what journalism is about. It's really going over and beyond and, overcoming those challenges to tell those stories, because it is so important in terms of public interest. So it's about working together. It is a challenge. It's always been there, and especially during war. But we cannot stop. We cannot self-censor. We will not self-censor. And it is related perhaps to Sandra's question about Western media and independence. The journalists I have worked with, I haven't come across one who self-censors. I invite you to look for Western politicians being interviewed by their own media, including even President Trump. Just look him up and look for press conferences. Sometimes even African leaders, when they are present in those press conferences, are just like, this is hot. So it is very admirable, the courage that people have. And no, I have not seen self-censorship with Ebola. People still go there to tell stories about what's happening on the ground, regardless. In fact, those interests that you talk about, we speak truth to power and we ask them about it. Just go and read the reporting on Ebola and on aid, the decisions that have been made by the traditional donors, most of whom come from the West, to cut aid over the last 2 years, and read the critique, the questions that are being asked to those leaders about those decisions to cut aid. It does not speak to any censorship at all, any interferences with independence. It actually just speaks to how independent, how free media can be.
Indeed. Speaking truth to power. I really apologize. We're running out of time, and it has been such a fabulous session, how to tell authentic African stories and curating them through our very own Ansoy, BBC, media. And just on that note, in terms of training, someone asked, there are a lot of trainings that BBC Media Action offers, which is a branch of the BBC. Please check them out online, and you can learn a thing or two, and especially in terms of security and very hands-on courses on artificial intelligence as well. I'd like to have a mic here. Just this one question. We'll have a session with Anne outside. Just one question. And as the mic comes down, I would like to invite Joy Madara, Newton Agesa, and Owen to give a vote of thanks to our guest this afternoon. So one question, and we'll go on.
Good evening. My name is Laura Nayere. I'm a journalist by profession. So I'm asking this
My
as
colleague Laura Nayere, karibu sana.
I'm asking these questions as a journalist. I work for the state broadcaster, the only state broadcaster, KBC. Now, mental health is very important for journalists. Anne, have you ever done a story and you felt like you are not going to do it again? I had an example. I did a story on extrajudicial killings. I was brutally terrified by the police. They harassed me. And then I said, I'm not ever going to do that story again. And I just said, didn't do justice on it. I even left it in between. And the worst is our media houses don't have counseling sessions. So as a journalist, how do you deal with that? Lastly, us as women, you have said we go for our stories. Now, during Mandamano, they will send a man, and then they'll send me for a press conference because I am a woman. And sometimes it's not by choice, it's because the media house is tailored. They think I cannot run during Mandamano. I'm a woman. So is it us as women or is it the media house as whole?
I think you had not seen you clearly. Miss Laura Nayere is one of our lecturers here at Daystar School of Communication. Thank you so much for being with us. And Mr. George Oginjo as well. Asanteni sana. On that, I did a documentary on extrajudicial killings a couple of years back. And in terms of the mental toll, including the reporting that we do as communication managers and advisors for international organizations, the mental toll is there, it's real. And one question that I've grappled with and I've sought support over is how do you cope? And this is, and someone said you have bombs going on, you have Ebola, you're reporting in conflict. How are you able to cope? And then leading up to Laura's question as we wind up.
Right. Thank you very much, Laura, for your question and also the one on reporting from hostile environments. So one of the things that happens in international media organizations especially, because, I mean, these organizations have been in existence for more than a century in some cases, is that they take hostile environment training very seriously, generally training very seriously. So one of the things, for example, I would never be deployed anywhere to a hostile environment, and that includes riots, protests. It's considered a hostile environment because people lose their lives there without hostile environment training. And it's like military training, maybe a tiny bit, a minuscule bit of that. So you know about to do, you know about you, so that it kind of raises your awareness of where you're going, how to prepare, how to keep yourself safe, what to do in case one person is injured, a member of the team is injured. So a lot of first aid training as well. And when it comes to mental health, it's very important. We need you whole to keep doing this job. So no assignment, no story is worth a life. No story is worth losing your health for, okay? So usually before anyone is deployed, and this is something that we're working on also on the Kenya Editors Guild, we have done a lot of the sensitization on hostile environment training, and the vast majority of editors are now aware. And we're trying to see how that can be rolled out to media houses. And I think it should also be rolled out to journalism students so that you are prepared, first of all. How do you do your risk assessments before? Because you don't just wake up and go. Even if it's a protest, you have to do a risk assessment before you go there. You have to have protection, whether it's personal protective equipment, whether it's a gas mask, even that is very important. So all these things are happening on a continual basis. It's incremental. Mental health, we've been talking about that as well in the Kenya Editors Guild. And I think we just need to take this step. The last 2 years have been challenging because of budget cuts from the traditional donors. But they were funding a lot of those things so that people are able to debrief after they cover. Sometimes it's even a road traffic accident. You come from there and you're carrying, it has affected you psychologically, you need to debrief. You need mental health support. Journalists need that. So it's really a question for the employer. And perhaps these questions can be asked to employers because they are the first people, labor rights, labor laws require them to have those protections in place. So the people to ask actually is the employers. But we have been working behind the scenes with the Editors Guild, with the International Press Association to try and grow the capacity for those things because they are very important. I've worked with colleagues who have had to leave the industry or have had to leave some places because it has affected them mentally, and it is very, very sad. It shouldn't come to that. We need to protect the journalists who are going to dangerous places to tell important stories. Regarding women, I think I don't want to say cultural. I think it's a mentality because I have covered virtually every protest that has happened in Nairobi. I have ran with those people. I know the taste of tear gas, and I know when they have added a little bit of flavor to it. So it shouldn't really be an impediment. And I think it also starts with us. Step forward and say, I would like to cover that story. Let it, you put it to them to say no, and you ask them why. And if they say it's because you're a woman, show them my video. Anyway, on a light note, but no, I don't think being a man or being a woman should arise at all at the workplace. We are all trained professionals. We can do the job.
Absolutely. And speak truth to power. As we come to an end, that's a wrap on today's conversation. And what a masterclass that has been with journalist, BC journalist Ansoi. So thank you so much for pulling back the curtain on 2 decades behind the mic. From Nairobi to London, to Singapore, to Bunia, where you just came back recently, and from crisis reporting to Newsday's global stage. You've reminded us that authentic storytelling is both craft and calling. And to our students here at Daystar University this afternoon, as you go out to your specific fields and work, the world is listening, and Africa's stories is yours to tell, honestly, boldly, and on your own terms, as Ansoi told. This has been your host, Werimo Gitau, and with your guest,
Ansoi. Thank you very much for your audience. Thank you.
Asanteni sana. On that note, I'd like to invite on the stage quickly before we depart, Owen, Joy. Is Newton with us? No? Joy, and may I have one volunteer to read Newton's vote of thanks? Just one volunteer. Yeah, Sheila, please come. So we'll start with Owen. Owen, if you could put it just in the middle. We'll start with Owen, Joy, then Sheila.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon once more. My name is Owen Collins Ndegwa, student in the School of Communication. Yeah, and I'm here to share my highlights from today's talk and to give a vote of thanks. For me, I have had 4 major highlights and lessons from this talk. And the first one is I've come to know that the best stories come from ordinary people. I realized that we as communication students, most of the time that when we are working on our assignments, we interview lecturers, people with high level of education. And today I've realized that even ordinary people have story. Everyone has a story. Yeah. So second, I've also learned that as upcoming journalists, public relations consultants, media consultants, we have to be up to the trends. If it's a season of World Cup, we have to get up with it. If it's the polygamist, we have to get up with it. Thirdly, I've also learned that it's not always about people or millions. It's about that one person. Most of us as students, we have huge visions, but we are like, will people come about it or go about it? But today I've learned that it's always about impacting that one person. It's not always about a larger group or a larger group of people. It's about one person. And the fourth one is go for it. I'll just quote it as how she put it, that go for it. So as growing students, we have to be go-getters. We shouldn't underestimate our faith, as she said. We have to get what we want to build our community, not only Kenya, but Africa. Yeah, those were my 4 major lessons today. And yeah, on behalf of the students in the School of Communication, I would like to sincerely thank you, our guest speaker, Ms. Ansoy, for taking this time to be with us. We are truly grateful for your willingness to share your knowledge and experience and insights with us. Your passion and authentic journalism in telling balanced African stories has inspired us today and challenged us to become better communicators and future media professionals. So to the Daystar University administration and everyone who worked behind the scenes to make this event successful, thank you for your support and coordination. And finally, thank you to all of you students who have attended and those that are watching online, and also to the online viewers for your participation in this talk. Your presence and engagement has made this session meaningful. And may God bless us and the entire Daystar fraternity. Asanteni sana.
Thank you very much, Owen. Joy?
Good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to just say one takeaway because Owen has said all of them. My one takeaway is to all female journalists: do not be the one to tell yourself no. But here I go. On behalf of the School of Communication, I would like to sincerely thank each and every one of you for joining us today. First, a very special thank you to Ms. Ansoy for taking the time to share your knowledge, experience, and wisdom with us. It is not easy to be the voice of the people. It takes courage, integrity, hard work, and a commitment to always seek the truth. As students, we are still learning what it means to become journalists. And listening to you today has reminded us why we chose this path in the first place. Your words have inspired us to tell stories that are authentic, factual, balanced, and impactful. I would also like to express our sincere gratitude to our lecturers for the guidance and for always investing in our growth. A special thank you to the head of School of Communication, Dr. Ann Jao, and to our lecturer, Ms. Wairimu Gitao, for making opportunities like this possible and for supporting our learning beyond the classroom. To Madam Kelly Mbithi and Immaculate Owor for their unwavering support with the logistics, thank you. To all students, as we leave this auditorium today, please remember that every story we tell has power to shape minds, communities, and even history. Let us choose to tell African stories the proper way, with truth, fairness, respect, and authenticity. Thank you all once again. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you, Joy. And finally, Sheila is going to read on behalf of Newton Agesa.
All right. Good afternoon. Hello and good afternoon to you all. I want to express a heartfelt thank you to our guest today, Madam Ansoy, and each and every one of you for being present for today's forum, where we actually debunked Africa's storytelling at an international stage. Ms. Soy, your being here today is special for us, Asante Sana. And to our lecturer, Ms. Soy Mugitao, thank you so much for showing us the right way to record and produce audio and introducing us to such a software as Audacity. On behalf of all students, I represent here this afternoon. You have been an inspiration since the commencement of this class, and we personally thank you and learn something new every day that we meet. To my classmates, Newton's classmates, keep up your hard work and dedication. As a technical person myself, a music producer, I cannot forget to pay a special tribute to the crew behind the scenes, to our Shine FM station manager, Kevin Ngati, to our marketing manager, Sheila Ndunge I, to our videographer and host, Javan Okwayo, to our editor-in-chief at Involvement Newspaper, Helga Mbodze, and to our key and very important player, Ian Kiama, who is the team leader, Daystar Production Unit. Asanteni sana, and we thank you all for being a wonderful audience today and making this a memorable day. Have a pleasant and blessed afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheila. And on behalf of Daystar University, I would love us to give a huge round of applause to Ms. Ann Soy for her time. Thank you so much. And as we wind up, I would like to welcome Mr. Masambo and our staff here for a gifting to Ms. Ann Soy. And I would request Mr. Masambo to finish the session with a word of prayer once we do the gifting. And every one of you, asanteni sana kwa kuja. It has been wonderful hosting you, and we shall have a photo moment outside with Anne as we interact further. Mr. Masambo. So we have something very small for you, and we are very grateful. If you want to say something, utaomba ama kwanza tumpatie zawadi.
Thank you so much.
I missed your session.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's all recorded.
Another.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Before even I pray, I'm sorry I ran late. I really wanted to listen to Madam Soy. She is described as a village girl. And I had a number of questions to ask her, whether the villages in her did inspire more journalism or limited her journalism. And given that I also worked very much for a long time in your area, I know Kunet very well as my village. Yeah. For 6 years, I was the bureau chief Kenya Times there. So all my questions I could, and then I blame myself. Let's give glory to the Lord for Soy and Kitao and the rest of the team that have made this day really a great day. Let's pray. Father, we return glory to you for this session. We return glory to you for Ms. Soy, for her courage, for her fearless commitment to journalism, Lord. And we thank her for impacting this same spirit in our students, Lord. Lord, we pray for Daystar University, pray for faculty, pray for the students, and pray for the administration. Lord, your son Jesus Christ, among his recruits were scribes, and we are mentoring scribes. Lord, work with these young scribes, these budding scribes. This country, the world over, needs the courage of these scribes. Lord, as we pray, I pray that you clear our paths, that you continue blessing our paths, that you continue impacting the spirit of scholarship, particularly for journalism in our commitment. I ask this in Jesus' last name. Amen.
Thank you, everybody. Owen, Joy, please come. Thank you, everybody. We'll walk out with Anne for a picture at the stairs. So our very able photographer.